They called him the Ice Duke, the man who never touched, never smiled, never loved. But tonight, Adrian Blackthorne, the most feared aristocrat in London, just did the impossible. He walked into a room full of England's most powerful lords, with the woman they all wanted destroyed, the scandal that should have ended him, the companion they called a gold digger, the nobody they tried to erase, and he declared he would marry her. Stay until the end to see how one woman's refusal to disappear brought the Ice Duke to his knees. Like and comment what city you're watching from. The first time Elena Whitmore heard the Duke of Ravencrest's voice, she was standing in the servants' entrance of Blackthorne House, rain-soaked and trembling. "Do not touch me in public." 6 words, delivered like a death sentence. Adrian Blackthorne stood 15 feet away in the marble foyer, his back rigid, his profile carved from stone. He didn't look at her when he spoke, didn't acknowledge her presence beyond that single brutal instruction. "Do you understand, Miss Whitmore?" Elena's fingers tightened around the handle of her worn carpet bag. Water dripped from her cloak onto the pristine floor, each drop echoing in the vast silence. She had traveled 3 hours by coach through a storm to reach Mayfair. Her shoes were ruined. Her dress, the only decent one she owned, was splattered with mud. And this man, this Duke, couldn't even spare her a glance. "I understand, Your Grace," she said quietly. "Mrs. Pemberton will show you to your quarters. My aunt expects you at breakfast. 8 o'clock. Not a minute later." He turned and walked away, his footsteps precise and measured against the marble. A man who controlled everything, including the exact rhythm of his own steps. The housekeeper, a stern woman with silver hair and eyes like flint, materialized at Elena's elbow. "This way, Miss Whitmore. And do try not to drip on the carpets." That had been 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks of learning to be invisible. 6 weeks of understanding exactly what the Duke of Ravencrest meant by his rule. "Do not touch me in public. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not exist unless I require you to exist." Elena had become a ghost in Blackthorne House, a paid companion to Lady Catherine Blackthorne, the Duke's elderly aunt, which meant she occupied a strange purgatory between servant and guest. Too educated to eat in the kitchen, too poor to dine with the family. She took her meals alone in the morning room. She walked the gardens when the family was indoors. She attended Lady Catherine during the day and disappeared into her small room each night, listening to the sounds of a house where she didn't belong. But Elena had survived worse than invisibility. 2 years ago, she had been Elena Whitmore, daughter of Viscount Whitmore, a girl who danced at Almack's and received flowers from eligible bachelors. She'd had a season, a dowry, a future. Then her father lost everything at the gaming tables. The estate was sold. The title, worthless without land or money, became a joke. Her mother died of fever that winter, in a boarding house that reeked of cabbage and despair. Her father followed 3 months later. The scandal sheets called it a tragic decline. The Ton called it karma. Elena called it Tuesday. She'd sold everything. Her mother's jewelry, her own gowns, even the few books she'd managed to hide from the creditors. She'd worked as a governess for a merchant family until the wife decided Elena was too pretty and too young. Then, as a lady's maid until the lady's son decided the same thing. The position with Lady Catherine was supposed to be different. Safe. A wealthy, elderly woman who needed someone to read to her, walk with her, keep her company. The Duke had been explicit in his requirements. Educated, well-bred, discreet. What he hadn't mentioned was that he would make her feel like a criminal for simply existing in the same house. "Elena, dear, are you listening?" Lady Catherine's voice pulled her back to the present. They sat in the blue drawing room, afternoon light streaming through tall windows. The old woman was wrapped in shawls, despite the warmth, her hands, gnarled with age, resting on an embroidery hoop she could no longer see well enough to use. "Forgive me, my lady. I was distracted. By my nephew, no doubt." Lady Catherine's smile was knowing. "He has that effect on people. Terrifying and magnetic in equal measure." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I wasn't— Oh, hush, I'm old, not blind." The dowager set aside her embroidery. "Adrian wasn't always like this, you know. Cold, untouchable. There was a time when he laughed, when he loved openly." Elena knew she shouldn't ask, shouldn't encourage this conversation, but curiosity won. What happened? Lady Catherine's expression grew distant. Isabel happened, his first wife, beautiful girl, sweet-natured. She died in childbirth 5 years ago, the baby with her. The words landed like stones in still water. He blamed himself, the dowager continued, convinced himself that his love had killed her, that caring too much, wanting too much, was a curse. So he built walls, locked himself away, turned into the Ice Duke. She fixed Elena with a sharp look. But walls are prisons, my dear, and every prisoner eventually yearns for freedom. Before Elena could respond, the drawing-room door opened. Adrian Blackthorne entered like winter itself. He was 32, but carried himself like a man who had already lived several lifetimes. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. His features were aristocratic, high cheekbones, strong jaw, a mouth that might have been sensual if it ever relaxed from its perpetual line of disapproval. He wore black, always black. Aunt Catherine. He bowed slightly. His gaze slid past Elena as if she were furniture. I'm attending the Pemberton dinner tonight. You'll need Miss Whitmore to accompany you to the opera. Nonsense, Lady Catherine said briskly. I'm too tired for the opera. Let the girl have an evening to herself. As you wish. He turned to leave. Adrian. He stopped, didn't turn around. You're going to wear yourself to nothing with all this work. The housing committee, the tenant reforms, the parliamentary sessions. When was the last time you slept properly? When I require rest, I'll take it. When you require human connection, you'll take that too. Eventually. His shoulders tensed. For a moment, Elena thought he might actually respond, might acknowledge that his aunt had struck a nerve. Instead, he walked out without another word. Lady Catherine sighed. See what I mean? A prison. The Pemberton dinner was exactly the kind of event Adrian loathed. 40 people crammed into an overheated dining room, making insipid conversation about horse races and scandals, while servants sweated over course after course of food that most of them wouldn't finish. But Lord Pemberton sat on the housing committee, and Adrian needed his vote. So he smiled when required, nodded at the right moments, played the game. Your Grace, I heard the most fascinating rumor about your aunt's new companion. Adrian's jaw tightened. Lady Victoria Ashcroft had positioned herself beside him during the fish course, her perfume cloying, her smile predatory. I wasn't aware my household staff warranted gossip, Lady Victoria. Oh, but she's not exactly staff, is she? Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. Elena Whitmore, the Viscount's daughter. I remember when she had her season. Such a pretty thing. Before the fall, of course. Your point? No point at all, Your Grace. Simply observing that you've shown remarkable charity. Taking in a fallen woman, giving her shelter. One might almost call it noble. The words were honeyed poison. Adrian set down his fork with careful precision. Miss Whitmore is employed as a companion to my aunt. Nothing more, nothing less. And I trust you'll ensure that remains the narrative. Victoria's eyes glittered with something dangerous. Of course, Your Grace, though one can't control what people say, especially when a beautiful young woman is living under the same roof as London's most eligible widower. I'm not eligible. You're breathing and titled. That makes you eligible. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. You know, Adrian, you can't mourn forever. Isabel wouldn't have wanted... Do not, the words came out like a whip crack. Do not presume to tell me what my wife would have wanted. The table went quiet. Adrian realized too late that he'd raised his voice, that everyone was staring, that he'd just given Victoria exactly what she wanted, a reaction. He stood abruptly. Forgive me, Lord Pemberton. I find I'm unwell. Please give my regards to Lady Pemberton. He left before anyone could respond. The carriage ride back to Blackthorne House was a study in self-loathing. Adrian stared out the window at the dark London streets, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. 5 years. 5 years since Isabel's death, and he still couldn't hear her name without feeling like his chest was caving in. 5 years of keeping everyone at arm's length, of building walls so high that nothing could reach him. It should have been enough. It should have protected him. So why did he find himself noticing the way Elena Whitmore tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous? Why did he know that she took her tea with honey instead of sugar? Why had he memorized the exact shade of her eyes? Not quite brown, not quite gold, but something in between, like autumn leaves in sunlight? Why did it bother him that Victoria Ashcroft had called her a fallen woman? The carriage stopped in front of Blackthorne House. Adrian climbed out, dismissed the driver, and stood for a moment on the front steps. Light glowed from the morning room window. He knew he should go inside, go to his study, bury himself in paperwork for the housing committee. Instead, he found himself walking toward that window. Elena sat at the small writing desk, a single candle burning beside her. She was bent over a letter, her hand moving steadily across the page. She'd unpinned her hair, a breach of propriety that would have scandalized most employers, and it fell in dark waves over her shoulders. She looked young, unguarded, real. Adrian's hand went to the window frame. Do not touch me in public. The rule he'd given her. The wall he'd built. But they weren't in public now. And he was so tired of walls. He turned away before he could do something foolish. Before he could knock on that window and ask her why she was awake at midnight, writing letters by candlelight. Before he could admit that for the first time in 5 years, he'd noticed someone, and it terrified him. The Halstead Ball was the social event of the season. Every member of the ton who mattered would be there, which meant Adrian had to attend, smile, and pretend he enjoyed watching the aristocracy preen and posture. Lady Catherine had insisted on going despite her earlier claims of fatigue, which meant Elena would accompany them. Just stay with my aunt, Adrian had told her that morning. Keep to the edges of the ballroom. Don't draw attention. Translation: be invisible. Elena had simply nodded. Now standing in the Halstead ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and gilded walls, Adrian regretted bringing her, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she was impossible not to notice. She wore a simple gown, pale blue, high-necked, nothing remarkable. Her hair was pinned in a modest arrangement. She carried herself with the practiced invisibility of someone who had learned to disappear. And yet, every time Adrian turned, his gaze found her. Watching her guide Lady Catherine to a chair, fetching her aunt a glass of lemonade, standing quietly against the wall, hands folded, eyes downcast, playing her role perfectly. It made him furious, though he couldn't explain why. Your Grace. Lord Julian Hawthorne appeared at Adrian's elbow, champagne in hand, smile easy. Hawthorne was everything Adrian wasn't: charming, relaxed, the kind of man who made friends effortlessly. Hawthorne. Quite the crush tonight. Lady Halstead outdid herself. Julian's gaze drifted across the ballroom, then stopped. Good God! Is that Elena Whitmore? Adrian's entire body went rigid. You know Miss Whitmore. Know her? We came out the same season, danced at Almack's. Before her father's troubles, of course. Julian's expression softened. Shame what happened to her family. She was a lovely girl, kind, genuine, not like most of the peacocks here. Adrian watched Julian watch Elena, and felt something dark and violent unfurl in his chest. If you'll excuse me, Julian said, already moving, I should pay my respects. Adrian wanted to grab him, to physically prevent him from crossing that ballroom. He did nothing, because he had no claim on Elena Whitmore. No right to dictate who spoke to her. No reason to care if Julian Hawthorne asked her to. Miss Whitmore, what an unexpected pleasure. Julian bowed. Elena looked up, startled, then recognized him. Lord Hawthorne, I didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to see you looking so beautiful. May I have this dance? Adrian stopped breathing. Elena glanced at Lady Catherine, who waved her away with an encouraging smile. I don't think that's appropriate, my lord. I'm here as a companion, not a guest. Nonsense. One dance won't scandalize anyone, unless you've forgotten how. Elena hesitated, then slowly she placed her hand in Julian's. The orchestra began a waltz, and Adrian watched Elena Whitmore step onto the ballroom floor for the first time in 2 years. She moved like water, like light, like everything beautiful in a world that had tried to crush her. Julian's hand rested on her waist. His other hand clasped hers. They swept across the floor, and the crowd parted to watch, because Elena Whitmore wasn't invisible anymore. She was radiant, and Adrian Blackthorne felt like his chest was splitting open. Jealousy was a new experience for Adrian. He'd never felt it with Isabel. Their marriage had been built on mutual respect, gentle affection. He'd never doubted her, never wanted to tear another man apart for simply looking at her. But watching Julian Hawthorne dance with Elena, he wanted blood. "Your Grace, you look positively murderous." Victoria Ashcroft materialized beside him, her smile knowing. "Oh my, you're watching the little companion. How fascinating." Adrian said nothing. "I told you people would talk. A beautiful young woman under your roof, and now she's dancing with eligible bachelors. What will the gossips say? They'll say Lord Hawthorne asked a lady to dance, nothing more." "Will they?" Victoria's voice turned silky. "Or will they say the Ice Duke's charity case is getting ideas above her station? That perhaps she came to Blackthorne House with ulterior motives?" Adrian's hands clenched into fists. "Choose your next words very carefully, Lady Victoria." "I'm merely thinking of your reputation, Your Grace, and the reputation of your reforms. Imagine if the Housing Committee heard rumors that you were distracted by a woman of questionable circumstances. Elena Whitmore is a respectable employee. Elena Whitmore is a desperate woman with nothing to lose and everything to gain." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. And desperate women do dangerous things. The waltz ended. Julian bowed, Elena curtsied, and across the ballroom their eyes met. Elena's wide, uncertain, searching his face for something he didn't know how to give. His, a storm of emotions he'd spent 5 years learning to suppress. The moment stretched, broke. Elena looked away first, and Adrian felt like he'd lost something vital. The carriage ride home was silent. Lady Catherine had fallen asleep in the corner, soft snores punctuating the darkness. Elena sat across from Adrian, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the window. He could feel the tension radiating from her, could sense the question she wasn't asking. "You danced well tonight." Her head turned sharply. "I apologize if I overstepped, Your Grace. Lord Hawthorne insisted and Lady Catherine encouraged me. I should have refused." "Why?" "Because it wasn't appropriate. I'm your employee, not a guest. I shouldn't have drawn attention." "You were magnificent." The words came out before he could stop them. Elena stared at him. "What?" "You were magnificent," Adrian repeated, his voice rough. "You danced like you were born to it, like you belonged in that ballroom more than anyone else there." "I don't belong there anymore." "You never stopped belonging. Circumstances changed." "You didn't," she laughed bitterly. "Circumstances? Is that what we're calling poverty now? Ruin? Scandal? None of that defines you." "Then what does, Your Grace? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm exactly what Victoria Ashcroft called me tonight, a desperate woman with nothing to lose." Adrian went very still. "Victoria said that to you?" "Not to me. About me. Loud enough for half the ballroom to hear." Elena's composure finally cracked. "She's right, you know. I am desperate. I do have nothing. This position with Lady Catherine is the only thing standing between me and the streets. So yes, I accepted Lord Hawthorne's invitation to dance because for 5 minutes I wanted to remember what it felt like to be human instead of invisible." "You're not invisible." "Aren't I? You made that very clear the day I arrived. Do not touch me in public. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't exist unless you need me to exist. I've followed every rule, Your Grace. I've been the perfect ghost." "Stop calling me Your Grace. It's your title. Stop." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Stop hiding behind formality. Stop pretending you don't feel this." "Feel what?" "This." He gestured between them, the movement sharp with frustration. "This thing that's been building since the day you walked into Blackthorne House soaking wet and defiant. You think I haven't noticed? You think I haven't spent 6 weeks trying not to notice?" Elena's breath caught. "You said not to touch you. In public." "I said not to touch me in public." His control was fracturing. "Because if you touched me, if anyone saw how I reacted, they would know. Everyone would know that I'm not the Ice Duke anymore." That you've completely destroyed every wall I built. Silence. The carriage swayed over cobblestones. Lady Catherine snored, and Elena Whitmore looked at Adrian Blackthorne like he'd just set her world on fire. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I'm falling in love with you." The confession tore out of him. And it terrifies me, because everyone I love dies or leaves or gets destroyed, and I won't let that happen to you. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "So what do we do?" "Nothing. We do nothing. You stay with Lady Catherine, I keep my distance, and we pretend this conversation never happened." "And if I don't want to pretend?" Adrian's expression hardened. "Then you're braver than I am." The carriage stopped in front of Blackthorne House. A footman opened the door. The spell broke. Adrian helped his aunt down first, careful and gentle, then extended his hand to Elena. She looked at that hand for a long moment, then placed hers in it. The contact lasted 3 seconds. It felt like lightning. The scandal broke the next morning. Elena woke to find Mrs. Pemberton at her door, the housekeeper's face pale and pinched. "His Grace requests your presence in his study, immediately." The walk down the corridor felt like a march to the gallows. Adrian stood at his desk, a newspaper crumpled in his fist. When Elena entered, he didn't look up. "Close the door." She obeyed. "Have you seen this?" He threw the paper onto the desk. The headline screamed in bold print. "Ice Duke's Secret, Fallen Aristocrat Worms Way into Blackthorne House." Below it, a political cartoon showed a woman, clearly meant to be Elena, climbing through a window while a duke slept, bags of money clutched in her hands. The article was worse. Sources close to the Duke of Ravencrest report that Miss Elena Whitmore, hired as companion to Lady Catherine Blackthorne, has been conducting a calculated campaign to seduce the wealthy widower. Miss Whitmore, whose family lost everything to gambling debts and scandal, now lives in luxury at Blackthorne House, attending balls and dancing with eligible bachelors while pretending to be a mere employee. Questions arise. What exactly are Miss Whitmore's intentions? And has the Ice Duke finally thawed? For all the wrong reasons? Elena felt sick. I would never... I know. Adrian's voice was flat. Victoria orchestrated this. Probably fed the story to the papers the night of the ball. Why? Because she wanted to marry me herself. Because she saw how I looked at you. Because she's vicious and calculating, and now she's destroying your reputation to protect her own interests. Elena's hands shook. What do we do? Adrian finally looked at her. His eyes were empty, dead. We end this. You'll leave Blackthorne House today. I've arranged a position for you with a family in Yorkshire, far from London, far from scandal. The words hit like a physical blow. You're sending me away. I'm protecting you. By exiling me? Her voice rose. By proving Victoria right? By letting her win? She's already won! Adrian slammed his hand on the desk. The Housing Committee meets next week. Lord Ashcroft, Victoria's father, sits on that committee. If I don't distance myself from you, he'll kill the reforms. Thousands of people living in slums won't get better housing. Children will keep dying of cholera and typhoid. Families will keep suffering. So you'll sacrifice me instead. Yes. The word was brutal in its honesty. I'll sacrifice you to save them, because that's what leadership requires. That's what responsibility demands. That's what cowardice looks like, Elena shot back. You're not protecting anyone, Your Grace. You're running, again, just like you've been running for 5 years. His face went white. Get out. Gladly. She turned toward the door, then stopped. You know what the saddest part is? Last night, in the carriage, I thought maybe you were brave enough to choose differently. To choose us. To stop being the Ice Duke and start being human again. Elena! But I was wrong. You're not ice, Your Grace. You're stone. Cold, hard, and completely unmovable. And I pity you. Because you're going to spend the rest of your life in that prison you built. And you're going to die there. Alone. She walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot. Adrian stood in his study, surrounded by books and papers and all the trappings of power, and felt nothing but empty. Oh. The carriage was scheduled to leave at noon. Elena packed her meager belongings with mechanical precision. The same carpet bag she'd arrived with, the same worn dresses, the same life, just in a different location. Lady Catherine wept openly when Elena came to say goodbye. "He's making a terrible mistake," the old woman said, clutching Elena's hands. "A terrible, terrible mistake. He's doing what he thinks is right. He's doing what he thinks is safe. There's a difference." Lady Catherine's grip tightened. "But you, my dear, you don't have to go quietly." Elena managed a broken smile. "What choice do I have? The choice to fight, the choice to refuse, the choice to stand your ground and make him look you in the eye when he destroys this. He won't change his mind. Then make him regret it." The carriage arrived at 11:45. Footman loaded Elena's bag. Mrs. Pemberton handed her an envelope. "Your wages, plus a reference letter from His Grace." Blood money and hollow words. Elena stood on the front steps of Blackthorne House, looking up at the imposing facade. Somewhere inside, Adrian was in his study, probably buried in work, pretending this wasn't happening. The footman opened the carriage door. Elena didn't move. She thought about Lady Catherine's words, about Victoria's smug certainty, about Adrian's dead eyes when he'd ordered her away. She thought about the last 2 years of her life, losing everything, fighting to survive, clawing her way back from ruin only to lose it all again because a duke was too scared to be vulnerable. She thought about that moment in the carriage last night. "I'm falling in love with you," and she made a choice. "No." The footman blinked. "Miss?" "No, I'm not leaving." "But, Miss Whitmore, His Grace gave explicit orders." "Then His Grace can come out here and tell me himself, to my face, not through a housekeeper or a reference letter or a paid carriage. If Adrian Blackthorne wants me gone, he can look me in the eye and say it." Mrs. Pemberton's face went pale. "Miss Whitmore, you cannot possibly—" "Watch me." Elena walked back into Blackthorne House. She didn't go to her room. She didn't go to Lady Catherine. She walked straight to Adrian's study and threw open the door without knocking. He stood at the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid. "The carriage is waiting," he said without turning. "I know." "Then why are you still here?" "Because I'm not leaving. Not like this. Not because you're afraid. This isn't about fear. It's entirely about fear." Her voice shook with fury and heartbreak. "You're terrified of losing someone, of feeling something, of being human. So you hide behind duty and responsibility and reform bills. You convince yourself that pushing people away is noble, protective. But it's just fear, Adrian, and I'm done enabling it." He finally turned. His face was a mask. "You don't have a choice." "I always have a choice. I've been making impossible choices for 2 years, and I choose to stay. I choose to fight. I choose you, even if you're too much of a coward to choose me back. If you stay, Victoria wins. The scandal will destroy both of us. Then let it." Elena stepped closer. "Let them talk. Let them print their vicious lies. Let Victoria Ashcroft and her father and the entire ton think whatever they want, because I would rather face scandal with you than safety without you. The reforms will happen or they won't. But you don't get to use other people's suffering as an excuse for your own cowardice. You don't get to sacrifice us to save your political agenda. This isn't an agenda. This is people's lives. And what about our lives?" she was shouting now. "What about my life? Don't I matter? Doesn't what we could have matter?" Adrian's control finally shattered. "Of course you matter. You're all that matters. That's why I'm doing this." "Then stop." She closed the distance between them. "Stop running. Stop hiding. Stop being the Ice Duke and be the man I fell in love with. You don't love me." "I do. I absolutely do. And it's terrifying and reckless and probably the stupidest thing I've ever done. But I love you, Adrian Blackthorne, and you love me. So stop pretending we can just walk away from this." They stood inches apart, her chest heaving, his eyes wild with something that looked like panic and hope and desperation all tangled together. "If I choose you," he said roughly, "if I choose us, Victoria will destroy the housing bill. People will suffer. If you don't choose us, we'll suffer. And you'll spend the rest of your life regretting it. You don't know that. I know you. I know that behind all those walls, you're dying for someone to see you, really see you. Not the Duke, not the title, not the power, just you. And I see you, Adrian. I see all of you, the good and the broken, and the scared, and I'm not going anywhere. His hand came up, trembling, and cupped her face. The first time he'd touched her voluntarily. I'm so afraid, he whispered. I know. Me too. But fear doesn't have to win. What if I lose you? What if you don't? He pulled her against him then, his arms wrapping around her like she was the only thing keeping him upright. She felt him shake, felt the ice finally, truly crack. I don't know how to do this, he said into her hair. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out together. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other in the wreckage of their lives, and somewhere outside a carriage waited. But Elena Whitmore wasn't getting in it. She was done disappearing. The embrace lasted exactly 17 seconds before reality crashed back in. Adrian pulled away first, his hands dropping from Elena's shoulders like he'd been burned. The vulnerability in his eyes shuttered closed, replaced by something harder, more familiar. This changes nothing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Elena's heart was still racing. It changes everything. The scandal sheets have already printed their poison. Victoria has already set her trap. The committee meeting is in 5 days. He turned back to the window, putting distance between them. One moment of weakness doesn't erase the consequences we're facing. Then we face them together. You don't understand what you're asking, what they'll do to you. I understand perfectly. I've already lost everything once. I survived it. I'll survive this too. Adrian's reflection in the glass looked haunted. You shouldn't have to survive. You should be protected, safe. I don't want safe. I want real. Elena moved to stand beside him, not touching, but close enough that he couldn't ignore her presence. And I want you to stop making decisions for me. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be locked away. Before he could respond, the study door burst open. Mrs. Pemberton stood in the doorway, her usual composure completely fractured. Your Grace, Lady Catherine has collapsed. They found the dowager in the blue drawing room, slumped in her chair, her face ashen. A doctor was already being summoned, but Elena pushed past everyone and dropped to her knees beside the old woman. Lady Catherine, can you hear me? The dowager's eyes fluttered open. When she saw Elena, she smiled weakly. You didn't leave. No, I didn't. Good girl. Her hand, cold and trembling, found Elena's. Adrian? I'm here, Aunt. He knelt on her other side, his face tight with worry. Stop being a fool, Lady Catherine said, her voice thin but fierce. Life is too short for walls and fear. You love her. She loves you. Everything else is just noise. Rest now. We'll discuss this later. There may not be a later. The dowager's grip tightened. I'm 83 years old. I've buried 2 husbands and 3 children. I know what death feels like, and it's circling closer every day. So listen to me, boy. Stop wasting time on what-ifs and maybes. Choose love. Choose life. Choose her. The doctor arrived then, ushering them out while he examined his patient. Elena and Adrian stood in the hallway, not looking at each other. She's going to be fine, Elena said, trying to convince herself as much as him. She's dying. Adrian's voice was flat. Has been for months. She didn't want me to know. Didn't want to worry me. Adrian, everyone I love dies or leaves. You said I was afraid. You were right. Because this is what happens. This is always what happens. He walked away before she could argue, before she could tell him that loving someone meant risking loss, and it was still worth it. Before she could say that his aunt was right, life was too short for walls. Lady Catherine recovered enough to be moved to her bedchambers, but the doctor's prognosis was grim. Her heart was failing. She had weeks, perhaps a month if she was fortunate. The news spread through Blackthorne House like winter frost, and with it came a different kind of coldness. The staff had read the scandal sheets. They'd seen the accusations, the cartoons, the vicious speculation about Elena's intentions. Now they looked at her differently, whispers following her down hallways, conversations stopping when she entered rooms. Even Mrs. Pemberton, who had always been professionally neutral, treated her with icy formality. The household accounts, Miss Whitmore. His Grace requests you review them with me. It was busy work, a task meant to keep Elena occupied and away from Lady Catherine's sick room, away from Adrian. She accepted it without complaint, spending hours in the estate office going over ledgers and expenditures while the rest of the house held its breath, waiting for the dowager to die. 3 days passed like sleepwalking. Adrian barely left his aunt's side. When he did, he moved through the house like a ghost, acknowledging no one, speaking only when necessary. Elena caught glimpses of him, standing at his study window at dawn, walking the gardens at midnight, looking more exhausted and haunted with each passing day. She wanted to go to him, to break through the walls he'd rebuilt even higher than before, but every time she tried, someone intercepted her, a servant with an urgent question. Mrs. Pemberton with another pointless task, the doctor needing to consult about Lady Catherine's care. It felt orchestrated. It felt like she was being slowly, carefully erased from Adrian's life. On the 4th morning, Victoria Ashcroft came to call. Elena was in the morning room when Mrs. Pemberton announced her, the housekeeper's expression carefully blank. "Lady Victoria is here to see His Grace. She's waiting in the drawing room." Of course she was. Elena set down her tea and followed the housekeeper, her stomach knotting with dread. Victoria sat on the cream sofa like a queen on a throne, her emerald gown perfectly arranged, her hair styled in the latest fashion. She looked up when Elena entered, and her smile was all teeth. "Miss Whitmore, how delightful! I was hoping to speak with you." "I thought you were here to see the Duke." "Oh, I am. But you and I should have a conversation first, woman to woman." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, please." Elena remained standing. "If you have something to say, say it." "Very well, direct. I can appreciate that." Victoria's smile sharpened. "You need to leave Blackthorne House, today, immediately, and this time you need to stay gone." "That's not your decision to make." "Isn't it? Let me explain something about how the world works, Miss Whitmore. Power isn't just about titles and money. It's about connections, influence, knowing exactly which levers to pull to make people dance." She stood, moving closer with predatory grace. "My father sits on the housing committee. So do 4 of his closest allies. Adrian needs their votes to pass his precious reforms. And right now, those votes are contingent on one simple condition: you disappear." Elena's hands clenched at her sides. "You're blackmailing him." "I'm protecting society from a fortune hunter. There's a difference." "I'm not a fortune hunter." "Really?" "You're a penniless nobody living in a duke's house, wearing clothes he bought, eating food he provides. You've wormed your way into his aunt's affections, and now you're targeting Adrian himself. What else would you call it? Employment, companionship, perhaps even love, though I doubt you'd recognize it." Victoria's expression turned vicious. "Love? You think what you feel for him is love? You're desperate and grasping, and you saw an opportunity. But Adrian doesn't love you. He feels guilty for you. Pity, perhaps. Maybe even lust. But not love. He loved Isabel, beautiful, perfect Isabel, who died because she wasn't strong enough to survive childbirth. And you think you can replace her?" The words were designed to cut, and they found their mark. But Elena had survived worse than Victoria Ashcroft's cruelty. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm trying to be here, to be real, to offer him something besides manipulation and games." How noble, how utterly deluded! Victoria's voice dropped to a poisonous whisper. "Listen carefully, Miss Whitmore. If you don't leave voluntarily, I will destroy you. Not just your reputation. I'll destroy any chance you have of employment anywhere. I'll make sure every door in England closes in your face. You'll end up in the poorhouses. Or worse. Do your worst." "I already have. Tomorrow's papers will feature a particularly interesting story about your father. About the real reason he gambled away your fortune. About the mistress he kept. The illegitimate children he fathered. All the sordid details your family worked so hard to bury." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a lie." "Is it? Or is it simply a truth you didn't know? Either way, it will destroy what's left of the Whitmore name. And by association, it will damage Adrian's reputation. His political enemies will use it against him. The reforms will die, and he'll hate you for it." He won't believe your lies. He won't have a choice. The evidence is very convincing. Letters, receipts, witness testimony. Victoria's smile was triumphant. I've been building this case for months, Miss Whitmore, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. You should have gotten in that carriage when you had the chance. The drawing room door opened. Adrian stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. Lady Victoria, I wasn't aware we had an appointment. Victoria's demeanor shifted instantly, the vicious predator becoming a concerned friend. Your Grace, I came as soon as I heard about Lady Catherine. How is she? Resting. Thank you for your concern. His gaze shifted to Elena. Miss Whitmore, my aunt is asking for you. It was a dismissal and a rescue wrapped in one sentence. Elena fled before Victoria could stop her. She found Lady Catherine propped up on pillows, looking small and frail against the massive four-poster bed. But her eyes were sharp when Elena entered. What did that viper want? To threaten me? To blackmail the Duke? The usual. And what did you tell her? That she could do her worst. Lady Catherine smiled. Good. Never let them see you bleed. She patted the bed beside her. Come, sit. I want to tell you a story. Elena settled carefully on the edge of the mattress. Adrian's father, Lady Catherine began, was a hard man, cold, demanding. He raised Adrian to believe that emotion was weakness, that love was a liability, that a duke must always put duty before everything else. That explains a lot. It does. But then Adrian met Isabel, and for a while he broke free. He laughed. He loved openly. He was happy. The dowager's expression grew sad. When she died, it confirmed everything his father had taught him, that caring too much leads to destruction. So he locked himself away again, became the Ice Duke everyone whispered about. And you think I can change him? I think you already have. I've watched him these past 6 weeks. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching, the way he listens when you speak, the way he fights himself every single day because he's terrified of what you make him feel. Lady Catherine's hand found Elena's. But fear is a powerful enemy, and Adrian's very, very afraid. So what do? You keep fighting. You keep refusing to disappear. You keep showing him that love isn't a curse. It's the only thing that makes us human. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Pemberton appeared, her expression tight. Miss Whitmore, His Grace requires your presence in his study immediately. The walk down the corridor felt eternal. Elena entered the study to find Adrian standing behind his desk, a letter in his hand. His face was carved from stone. Close the door. She did. What did Victoria say to you? Elena hesitated. She told me to leave, threatened to destroy my reputation and my father's memory if I didn't. And you told her no? Yes. Adrian set down the letter with careful precision. This arrived an hour ago from Lord Ashcroft. The Housing Committee has moved up their vote. It's happening tomorrow instead of next week. And he's made his position very clear. Unless I publicly distance myself from you, he and his allies will vote against the reforms. So Victoria's blackmail worked? It appears so. His voice was hollow. 5 years of work, research, negotiation, planning, all about to collapse because I was selfish enough to let you stay. You didn't let me stay. I chose to stay. And now thousands of people will suffer because of that choice. Children living in slums without clean water, families crowded into rooms too small to breathe, disease, poverty, death, all because I was weak. Elena's chest tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying I have to choose. The reforms or you. And I have to choose the reforms. No. No, you don't. We can fight this. We can expose Victoria's manipulation. With what proof? She's been too careful, too clever. And even if we could prove it, the damage is done. The committee votes tomorrow. There's no time. Then we make time. We find another way. There is no other way. His control finally snapped. This is reality, Elena. This is what happens when emotion clouds judgment. I let myself feel something for you, and now everything I've worked for is burning down. So it's my fault? I'm the problem? You're the variable I didn't account for, the risk I couldn't calculate. The words hit like a slap. Elena stepped back, her eyes stinging. I'm not a variable. I'm a person, A person who loves you, who's willing to fight for us. And I'm a duke who has responsibilities beyond my own desires, who has to think about more than just what I want. Then what do you want, Adrian? Tell me honestly. What do you actually want? He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes full of something that looked like agony. I want you to leave, tonight, before the vote, before Victoria can print her lies, before this gets any worse. You're choosing them over me. I'm choosing thousands of people over one. That's what leadership means. That's what cowardice looks like. Elena's voice shook. You're using duty as an excuse, hiding behind responsibility because you're too afraid to actually fight for something real. Get out. No. His jaw clenched. I'm ordering you to leave Blackthorne House immediately. Your employment is terminated effective now. I'll provide a reference and 3 months' wages, but you need to go. Make me. Elena planted her feet. Call the footmen. Have them drag me out. Do it yourself if you're so certain this is right. But I'm not leaving voluntarily. Not again. Not for Victoria. Not for the committee. Not even for you. They stood on opposite sides of the desk, a gulf wider than the room between them. Why are you making this so difficult? Adrian's voice cracked. Because someone has to fight for us. And if you won't, I will. You can't win this fight. Maybe not. But at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll know I didn't just surrender because things got hard. She moved around the desk, closing the distance he'd tried to maintain. You told me you were falling in love with me. Was that true? It doesn't matter, but was it true? Yes. The admission tore out of him. Yes, I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you enough to send you away before I destroy you the way I destroy everything I care about. Then let me make my own choice. Let me decide if loving you is worth the risk. And what happens when the scandal breaks? When Victoria prints her lies and society turns on you? When you can't find work anywhere because you're associated with me? Then we face it together. Or we don't. But it's my choice to make, not yours. Adrian's hands gripped the edge of his desk like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I don't know how to do this. How to be vulnerable. How to let someone in. You start by trusting me. By believing that I'm strong enough to weather whatever storm is coming. And if you're not, then I'll break. And I'll rebuild, just like I did before. Just like I'll do again if I have to. But I'd rather break fighting for something real than stay safe in a life that means nothing. The clock on the mantel chimed 10. Outside, London continued its endless rhythm. Carriages on cobblestones, merchants calling wares, the city breathing in and out like a living thing. Inside Adrian's study, 2 people stood at a crossroads. The committee votes tomorrow at 2, Adrian said finally. If I don't publicly distance myself from you before then, the reforms fail. I know. Victoria will print her story either way. Your father's reputation will be destroyed. Let it burn. He's dead. I'm not. And I'm tired of letting dead men's mistakes define my life. Society will crucify you. They already are. What's a little more fuel for the fire? Adrian shook his head slowly, something like wonder crossing his face. You're insane. Probably. Is it working? For the first time in days, the ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'm considering it. Then consider this. Elena stepped closer, close enough to see the shadows under his eyes, the lines of exhaustion and pain carved into his face. I didn't survive the last 2 years just to roll over now. I didn't claw my way back from nothing just to let Victoria Ashcroft decide my fate. And I didn't fall in love with the Ice Duke. I fell in love with the man underneath, the one who fights for tenant reforms even though it makes him enemies. The one who takes care of his aunt. The one who's terrified of feeling anything because he feels everything so deeply. Elena, I'm not done. Tomorrow, you're going to walk into that committee meeting and you're going to make a choice. You can distance yourself from me, play Victoria's game, save the reforms and sacrifice us. Or, she took a breath, you can do something no one expects. You can fight. Fight how? However you need to. But know this, whatever you choose, I'll support it. If you need me to leave to make the reforms pass, I'll go. Not because I'm weak, not because I'm giving up, but because I trust you to make the right decision. And whatever that decision is, I'll respect it. It was the hardest thing she'd ever said, giving him permission to break her heart. Adrian stared at her like she'd just handed him both salvation and damnation wrapped in the same package. You would do that? Walk away if I asked? I would hate it. It would destroy me. But yes, if you honestly believe it's the right choice, not the safe choice, not the easy choice, but the right one, I'll go. Why? Because I love you. And love means trusting someone to make impossible decisions, even when those decisions hurt. The study door burst open. Mrs. Pemberton stood there, her face white with panic. Your Grace, it's Lady Catherine. She's asking for you both. The doctor says... Her voice broke. He says it's time. They ran. Elena's skirts tangled around her legs as she sprinted down the corridor, Adrian's longer strides carrying him ahead. They burst into Lady Catherine's chambers to find the doctor standing by the bed, his expression grave. The dowager lay against her pillows, her breathing shallow and labored. But when she saw them, her eyes opened. There you are, she whispered. Both of you, together. Good. Adrian took one of her hands. Elena took the other. Don't talk, Aunt. Save your strength. For what? I'm dying, boy. Let me use what little I have left for something worthwhile. She looked at Elena. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Don't let anyone tell you different. Thank you, my lady. And you. Lady Catherine's gaze shifted to Adrian. Stop being an idiot. Life is happening right now. Right here. And you're about to let the best thing that ever happened to you walk away because you're afraid. I'm trying to protect her. You're trying to protect yourself. From pain. From loss. From having to feel anything real. Her grip tightened with surprising strength. But here's what I learned in 83 years. The pain of loving and losing is nothing compared to the emptiness of never loving at all. Tears tracked down Adrian's face. I can't lose you too. You're not losing me. I'm just moving on. And I'll go a lot easier knowing you're not going to waste the rest of your life hiding behind walls. She looked at their joined hands on her bed. Love each other. Fight for each other. Choose each other every single day. That's all that matters in the end. Aunt Catherine, promise me. Adrian's voice broke. I promise. Both of you. Elena nodded through her own tears. I promise. Good. Lady Catherine's eyes drifted closed. Now let me rest. And don't you dare wear black to my funeral. I want colors, music, champagne, a proper celebration. Yes, Aunt. They sat with her through the night. The doctor came and went. Servants tiptoed in to add logs to the fire, to refresh water glasses, to stand vigil with the family they'd served for decades. And as dawn began to paint the London sky in shades of rose and gold, Lady Catherine Blackthorne took one last breath and was gone. Adrian didn't make a sound, but Elena felt him shatter. She held his hand as the doctor confirmed what they already knew, held him as Mrs. Pemberton wept openly, held him as the sun rose on a world that no longer contained the woman who had raised him, loved him, and in her final hours given him permission to be human. When everyone else had left to make arrangements, Adrian finally looked at Elena. His eyes were red, his face ravaged with grief. The committee meets in 8 hours, he said. I know. She would want me to fight. Yes, she would. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Elena squeezed his hand. Then borrow my strength. That's what love is, holding each other up when we can't stand alone. He pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted off its axis. And Elena held him back. Tomorrow would bring battles, choices, consequences. But right now, in the quiet morning light, they had this. They had each other. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The funeral arrangements consumed the morning in a blur of black crepe and hushed conversations. Adrian moved through it mechanically, signing documents, approving flower selections, receiving condolences from staff who had served his aunt for decades. He was the Duke of Ravencrest again, every emotion locked behind the mask he wore so well. Only Elena saw the cracks. The way his hand trembled when he held his aunt's favorite shawl, the hollow look in his eyes when the undertaker asked about the casket, the breath that shuddered through him when Mrs. Pemberton presented Lady Catherine's jewelry box for storage. "The pearls," he said quietly. "My aunt would want Elena to have the pearls." Mrs. Pemberton's lips thinned into a disapproving line, but she retrieved the strand without comment. Adrian took them and crossed to where Elena stood by the window, trying to stay invisible while the household grieved. "She wore these on her wedding day," he said, placing them in Elena's hands. "And every important occasion after, she'd want you to have them." "Adrian, I can't. Please." His eyes met hers, raw with grief and something else, something desperate. "Let me give you this. Let me honor her wishes." Elena closed her fingers around the pearls, their weight substantial and warm. "Thank you." He nodded once, then turned back to the waiting undertaker. But Mrs. Pemberton's expression had shifted from disapproval to calculation, and Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. At noon, the scandal sheets arrived. A footman brought them to Adrian's study on a silver tray, as if the venom they contained could be sanitized by presentation. Elena was there, having been summoned to discuss the funeral arrangements when Adrian unfolded the first paper. His face turned to stone. "What is it?" Elena asked, though she already knew. He handed her the paper without a word. The headline screamed across the front page. "Viscount's Dark Secret. Whitmore's Hidden Shame Revealed." Below it, a detailed exposé claimed her father had kept a mistress in Cheapside for 15 years, that he'd fathered 3 illegitimate children, that the gambling debts that destroyed their family weren't from cards at all. They were payments to silence the mistress when she threatened to go public. It was all lies. But the evidence looked damning, letters that had supposedly been found in her father's papers, testimony from the mistress herself, now conveniently deceased, dates and details that aligned just well enough to be believable. "Victoria," Elena whispered. Every word a fabrication. Adrian's voice was cold fury. "She must have spent months building this, forging documents, inventing witnesses." "It doesn't matter if it's true. People will believe it." Elena set down the paper with shaking hands. "This is what she warned me about, the story she promised to print if I didn't leave. She printed it anyway, because she knew I wouldn't go. This was always the plan." Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. "She's destroying me to hurt you. Then I'll destroy her right back." "How? She's covered her tracks. You said so yourself. She's too clever, too careful." Adrian walked to his desk and pulled out a folder thick with papers. "Victoria Ashcroft isn't the only one who can build a case. I've had investigators looking into her family's finances for the past 3 months, ever since she started making overtures about marriage." "Why?" "Because I'm a duke who survived 5 years of widowhood without remarrying. That made me a target for every ambitious family in London. I needed to know who I was dealing with." He opened the folder. "The Ashcrofts are drowning in debt. Lord Ashcroft has been embezzling from the housing fund to cover losses from failed investments. That's why he's so determined to kill the reforms. If they pass, there will be a full audit, and his theft will be exposed." Elena stared at him. "You've known this the entire time?" "I suspected. I only received proof 2 days ago." His expression was grim. "I was planning to use it as leverage to force Ashcroft to support the reforms or face criminal charges. And now? Now I use it to burn Victoria's credibility to ash." Adrian began sorting through documents. "If I can prove her father is a criminal, her accusations against you lose power. She becomes the daughter of a thief, and this story becomes a desperate attempt to deflect attention." "But the committee votes at 2. That's less than 2 hours away. There's no time to—" "There's always time." He looked up, and for the first time since his aunt's death, something fierce and alive burned in his eyes. "Victoria wants to play games? Fine. But she's about to learn that I've been playing this game longer and better than she ever could." A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Pemberton entered, her face carefully neutral. "Your Grace, Lord Ashcroft has arrived. He says the matter is urgent and he must speak with you before the committee meeting." Adrian and Elena exchanged a look. "Show him in," Adrian said. Lord Ashcroft entered like he owned the room, tall, silver-haired, his presence commanding despite the slight paunch around his middle. He carried himself with the arrogance of a man who had never been told no. His gaze slid over Elena with barely concealed contempt before settling on Adrian. "Blackthorne, I trust you've seen this morning's papers." "I have." "Then you understand the position you're in. This scandal with the Whitmore girl has become untenable. If you want any hope of the committee supporting your reforms, you need to dismiss her immediately, publicly, and you need to do it before the vote." Adrian leaned against his desk, his posture deceptively casual. "And if I refuse? Then the reforms die. Simple as that." Ashcroft smiled, confident in his power. 5 votes against. The housing bill fails, and all your work, all those months of research and negotiation, becomes worthless. "I see. And this ultimatum is purely about protecting the integrity of the committee, I assume." "Of course. We can't have our members associated with scandal. It reflects poorly on all of us." "How noble." Adrian's tone was mild, almost pleasant. "Tell me, Lord Ashcroft, when did embezzling from the housing fund become acceptable committee behavior?" The color drained from Ashcroft's face. "I beg your pardon?" "The housing fund. The one established 3 years ago to improve tenement conditions in the East End. You've been skimming from it, approximately £15,000 over the past 18 months. Adrian pushed away from the desk and walked closer. "Did you really think no one would notice? Or did you assume your position protected you from scrutiny?" "That's outrageous accusation. It's documented fact." Adrian gestured to the folder on his desk. "Bank records, transfer receipts, testimony from your own clerk, who was more than happy to cooperate once he understood the alternative was being charged as an accomplice." Ashcroft's hands clenched into fists. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Would you like me to present this evidence to the committee, to the authorities, to the newspapers that printed your daughter's lies this morning?" Silence crashed through the study. Elena watched Lord Ashcroft's face cycle through emotions: shock, rage, calculation, and finally, fear. "What do you want?" Ashcroft asked, his voice tight. "I want you to vote for the housing reforms. I want you to convince your allies to do the same. And I want your daughter to print a retraction of this morning's story with a full apology to Miss Whitmore." "That's impossible. Victoria won't." "Then you'll go to prison." Adrian's voice was ice and iron. "And your family will be destroyed, not just financially, socially, criminally. Every door in London will close. Every connection will sever. You'll lose everything." "You wouldn't dare. The scandal would damage you too." "I'm already damaged. My aunt just died. Society is questioning my judgment. What's one more scandal?" Adrian stepped closer, and Elena saw the Duke of Ravencrest in full, cold, ruthless, absolutely lethal. "But I'll survive. I always do. Will you?" Ashcroft's face had gone purple. "You bastard." "Yes, I am, and I'm done playing nice." Adrian walked to the door and opened it. "You have until the committee meeting to decide. Vote for the reforms and control your daughter, or I release everything. Your choice." Lord Ashcroft stormed out without another word. The door slammed behind him. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was reckless, dangerous, possibly stupid. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "He could call my bluff. Could decide that facing charges is worth destroying me in the process." "Is it a bluff?" "No. Every word was true, and if he doesn't cooperate, I'll release the evidence and let the pieces fall where they will." "Even if it damages you?" Adrian turned to face her fully. "My aunt's last words were to fight for you, to choose you, every single day." His expression was raw. "I'm done being afraid. Done letting people like Victoria and her father manipulate me with threats and ultimatums. If fighting for us means burning down the world I've been trying to protect, then so be it." Elena crossed to him, her heart pounding. "The committee meets in 90 minutes. What if Ashcroft doesn't break? What if he votes against you anyway?" "Then we lose the reforms. For now. But I'll find another way. Build another coalition. I won't give up on those families living in slums." He touched her face, his hand trembling slightly. "But I won't give up on us either. Not anymore." Adrian? A commotion in the hallway cut her off, raised voices, running footsteps. And then Victoria Ashcroft burst into the study without being announced, her face flushed with fury. "How dare you threaten my father?" she spit. Mrs. Pemberton appeared behind her, breathless. "Your Grace, I tried to stop her." "It's fine, Mrs. Pemberton. Leave us." The housekeeper withdrew, closing the door with a disapproving click. Victoria advanced on Adrian like a viper preparing to strike. "You think you can blackmail us? Destroy my father's reputation? We'll ruin you, both of you. I'll make sure every newspaper in London prints worse stories than today's. You'll do nothing," Adrian interrupted, his voice cutting through her tirade like a blade. "Because if you print one more word about Elena, if you breathe one more lie, I'll ensure your father spends the next decade in prison. And you'll spend it watching your family name become synonymous with theft and corruption." "My father hasn't done anything wrong." "We both know that's a lie, and soon everyone else will know it too." Victoria's expression twisted into something ugly. "You're choosing her? This nobody? This fortune-hunting parasite?" "I'm choosing love over manipulation, truth over lies, and yes, I'm choosing Elena." Adrian moved to stand beside Elena, his presence solid and unwavering, which you would understand if you'd ever actually cared about anything besides power and position. "You'll regret this. Both of you will regret this." "Possibly, but I'll regret it together with someone I love." "What will you have, Victoria? An empty title, a disgraced father, the satisfaction of destroying something beautiful because you couldn't have it for yourself?" Victoria's hands were shaking with rage. "The committee will never support you now. Even if my father votes yes, the others will see this for what it is: weakness. You're letting a woman cloud your judgment, letting emotion override duty." "No. I'm finally understanding what duty actually means. It's not about sacrificing everything for some abstract greater good. It's about fighting for the people who matter, all of them, the families in slums and the woman standing beside me. I'm done pretending I have to choose between them." "You're a fool." "Then I'm a fool who knows what he wants." "Can you say the same?" For a moment, Victoria looked like she might actually attack him physically. Then her expression shifted, from fury to something colder, more dangerous. "Fine. You want war? You'll have it. But remember this moment, Blackthorne. Remember that I gave you a chance to save yourself." She turned toward the door, then stopped. "Oh, and Miss Whitmore? That story about your father? You might want to ask yourself how I knew about the mistress in Cheapside, about the children, about the payments." Elena felt her stomach drop. "What are you saying?" Victoria's smile was cruel. "I'm saying someone very close to your family gave me that information. Someone who hated your father almost as much as I hate you." She paused for maximum impact. "Your mother's sister, your dear Aunt Beatrice. She was quite helpful once I explained how much I'd pay for family secrets." The words hit like a physical blow. Aunt Beatrice. Her mother's only sibling, the one person who had refused to help when Elena's family fell apart, who had turned them away when they needed shelter. "You're lying," Elena whispered. "Am I? Or did your precious aunt simply tell you what you wanted to believe? That your father was a noble man destroyed by bad luck? The truth is so much messier, isn't it? He was a cheat, a liar, a man who betrayed your mother for years while she smiled and pretended everything was fine." "Get out." Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. "Get out before I throw you out myself." Victoria laughed. "Careful, Your Grace. Violence against a lady would make wonderful headlines, almost as wonderful as the ones coming tomorrow." She swept toward the door. "Enjoy the committee meeting. I know I will." She left in a rustle of silk and malice. Elena stood frozen, Victoria's words echoing in her mind. "Someone very close to your family, your dear Aunt Beatrice." "Elena," Adrian's hand found hers. "Don't listen to her. This is what she does. She finds the wounds and twists the knife." "But what if it's true? What if my father really did—" Her voice broke. "What if everything I believed about my family was a lie?" "Then it's a lie that doesn't define you. Your father's choices, whatever they were, are not your burden to carry." "But they are. Don't you see? Victoria's right. I am desperate. I did come here with nothing. And maybe she's right about the rest too. Maybe I am just—" "Stop." Adrian pulled her around to face him. You are not what Victoria says. You are not what those newspapers print. You are Elena Whitmore, a woman who survived catastrophic loss and refused to let it break her, who fights for what she believes in, who showed me that walls don't protect, they imprison. His hands framed her face. Whatever your father did or didn't do, it has nothing to do with who you are. Tears spilled down her cheeks. How can you still want me? After all this? After the scandal and the lies and now this? Because I love you, not despite the scandal, not in spite of the lies. Just you, exactly as you are. She kissed him then, desperate and fierce and full of all the fear and hope and love she couldn't put into words. He kissed her back like she was air and he was drowning. When they finally broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. The committee, she whispered. I know. 60 minutes. I know. What are we going to do? Adrian pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. We're going to walk into that meeting together, and we're going to show them that I'm not the Ice Duke anymore, that I'm a man who's done hiding. They'll destroy you. They'll try. But I've spent 5 years being invincible and alone. I'd rather be vulnerable with you than safe by myself. A clock chimed somewhere in the house. 1:30. 30 minutes until the committee meeting. 30 minutes until Adrian walked into a room full of powerful men and either secured his reforms or watched 5 years of work crumble. 30 minutes to decide how to play the most dangerous gamble of his life. Elena straightened her shoulders, wiping away tears. Then we'd better make it count. They arrived at Westminster Hall with 15 minutes to spare. The committee room was already filling with members, lords and politicians and wealthy landowners who held the power to change thousands of lives or condemn them to continued suffering. Lord Ashcroft stood near the window, his face a carefully blank mask. When he saw Adrian and Elena enter together, his jaw tightened. Whispers rippled through the room. Is that the Whitmore girl? The one from the scandal sheets? Blackthorne brought her here? Has he lost his mind? Adrian ignored them all. He guided Elena to a chair along the wall, the visitors section where observers could watch the proceedings. Are you sure about this? She whispered. No, but I'm doing it anyway. The committee chairman called the meeting to order. Gentlemen, we convene today to vote on the proposed housing reform bill, which would allocate funds for improving tenement conditions throughout London's poorest districts. Duke Blackthorne has prepared a final presentation. Your Grace, the floor is yours. Adrian stood, every eye in the room fixed on him. He walked to the front, his footsteps measured and deliberate. When he reached the podium, he didn't look at his notes, didn't refer to the carefully prepared speech he'd spent weeks crafting. Instead, he looked directly at the men who held his future in their hands. 5 years ago, I lost my wife and child to a tragedy that I believed was my fault. I convinced myself that love was dangerous, that caring too much led to destruction. So I built walls, locked myself away, became the Ice Duke you all whisper about. Uncomfortable silence filled the room. During those 5 years, I threw myself into work, into causes, into anything that let me feel productive while remaining emotionally dead. This housing reform became my obsession, a way to help people without having to actually connect with them, a way to do good while staying safely distant. Lord Ashcroft shifted in his seat, but something changed 6 weeks ago. I hired a companion for my aunt, and that woman, Miss Elena Whitmore, who sits in this room right now, showed me that walls don't protect, they imprison. Gasps rippled through the committee. You've all read the scandal sheets. You know what they're saying about her, about us. And I'm here to tell you that I don't care. Adrian's voice grew stronger. Not because the accusations are false, though they are. Not because I'm above scandal, though I've tried to be. But because I've finally learned something that took me 5 years and the death of the woman who raised me to understand. Life is too short to let fear make our decisions. Your Grace, the chairman interrupted, while we appreciate your candor, perhaps we should focus on the housing bill. This is about the housing bill. Adrian cut him off. Because you're about to vote based on fear. Fear of scandal, fear of association, fear of what supporting me might cost you politically. He looked directly at Lord Ashcroft. Some of you have been threatened, manipulated, told that voting yes will have consequences. Ashcroft's face went pale. And some of you have done the threatening, the manipulating, because you're more invested in protecting your own interests than in helping the people who actually need it. This is outrageous, what one of the lords began. This is honesty. Finally. Adrian pulled out the folder he'd brought. I have evidence that Lord Ashcroft has been embezzling from the housing fund. £15,000 over 18 months. I could have used this quietly, could have blackmailed him into supporting the bill, could have played the same game you all play, trading favors and threats behind closed doors. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. But I'm done with that game. Done pretending that politics requires sacrificing integrity. Done believing that I have to choose between doing good and being happy. He set the folder on the podium. So here's my offer. Vote for this bill because it's right. Because children are dying in slums that could be improved. Because families deserve better than the squalor we've allowed to persist. Not because I've threatened you, not because you're afraid of scandal, but because it's the right thing to do. And if we don't? Lord Ashcroft stood, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. What then, Blackthorne? You'll release your evidence? Destroy me? Prove that you're just as ruthless as the rest of us? If you vote no? Yes, I'll release everything. You'll face criminal charges, your family will be ruined, and I'll spend the next year building a new coalition to pass this bill anyway. Adrian's gaze swept the room. But if you vote yes, if even one of you decides that doing the right thing matters more than protecting your pride, then this evidence disappears. Ashcroft faces no charges, and we all move forward knowing that we chose people over politics. You're blackmailing the entire committee, someone said. No, I'm giving you a choice, a real one, not the false choice Victoria Ashcroft tried to force on me. Choose duty or love, sacrifice others, or lose everything. I'm offering you the chance to choose integrity, to prove that we're better than the games we've been playing. The chairman cleared his throat. Your Grace, this is highly irregular. Everything about this is irregular, but so is bringing the woman I love to a committee meeting. So is admitting that I've been wrong for 5 years. So is standing here and telling you that I'm done being the Ice Duke. Adrian turned toward Elena, and his expression softened. I'm done choosing fear over love, done sacrificing happiness for some abstract sense of duty, done pretending that I can do this alone. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. So vote however your conscience dictates. Support the bill or kill it. Stand with me or against me. But know that regardless of the outcome, I'm walking out of here with Elena Whitmore. I'm going to marry her. I'm going to love her openly and proudly. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life fighting for what matters. The people in slums and the woman who taught me how to be human again. He stepped away from the podium. Silence. Then Lord Ashcroft stood slowly, his face unreadable. I vote yes, he said quietly. The room exploded. The room erupted in chaos. Lords shot to their feet, shouting over each other. Some demanded order. Others called for Adrian's removal. A few simply stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Lord Ashcroft remained standing, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, rage, humiliation, and something that might have been grudging respect. You vote yes? Lord Pemberton sputtered. After he just accused you of embezzlement in front of the entire committee? Because he accused me of embezzlement, Ashcroft said, his voice cutting through the noise, and gave me a choice. Face the consequences of my actions or help him do something that actually matters. He looked at Adrian. I've spent 3 years stealing from a fund meant to help people who can't help themselves. That makes me a thief and a coward. The least I can do now is vote for the thing I was too corrupt to support honestly. The room went silent. Furthermore, Ashcroft continued, my daughter has been spreading lies about Miss Whitmore. Lies I knew were fabricated but allowed to be printed because they served my interests. That makes me complicit in destroying an innocent woman's reputation. He turned toward Elena. I apologize, Miss Whitmore, for my daughter's actions and my own cowardice. Elena couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Lord Pemberton stood next. I vote yes as well. Then Lord Manchester. Yes. Lord Fairfax. Yes. One by one, the committee members rose and cast their votes, some grudgingly, some with clear relief, as if Adrian's gamble had freed them from a game they were tired of playing. When the final count was tallied, the housing reform bill had passed, unanimously. The chairman banged his gavel, though his hand shook slightly. The motion carries. The housing reform bill is approved for parliamentary consideration. Adrian stood perfectly still, as if moving might shatter whatever spell had just been cast. Then Lord Ashcroft walked over and extended his hand. You're either the bravest man in London or the most foolish. I haven't decided which. Adrian shook it. Can't I be both? Apparently. Ashcroft's expression hardened. My daughter won't take this well. She'll see it as betrayal. She'll survive. The question is whether you're prepared to control her. If she prints more lies about Elena, she won't. I'll see to it personally. Ashcroft glanced at Elena. And I'll ensure a retraction is printed. A full one. With my name attached, explaining that I was the source of the false information and that it was part of a failed political manipulation. That will destroy your reputation, Adrian said. I've already destroyed it. At least this way, I destroy it honestly. Ashcroft released Adrian's hand. Your aunt would be proud of you, Blackthorne. You were always her favorite, you know. She used to say you had the potential to be the best of us, if you could just learn to stop hiding. He walked out before Adrian could respond. The other committee members followed, some offering congratulations, others simply nodding as they passed. Within minutes, the room had emptied except for Adrian and Elena. They stood on opposite sides of the chamber, the distance between them suddenly feeling vast. You did it, Elena said finally. We did it. Adrian crossed to her, his steps uncertain. I couldn't have done that without you, without knowing you were here. That whatever happened, we'd face it together. What happens now? Now we go home, and we bury my aunt with the celebration she demanded. And then, he stopped. Then I ask you properly. The way I should have from the beginning. Before she could ask what he meant, the chamber doors burst open again. Victoria Ashcroft stood in the doorway, her face twisted with fury. You, she hissed, advancing on Adrian. You humiliated my father, forced him to confess in front of the entire committee, destroyed everything we've been building. Everything you've been building on lies and manipulation, Adrian interrupted. Your father made his choice. He chose integrity over corruption. Maybe you should try it sometime. Integrity? Victoria laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. You stand there with your charity case and lecture me about integrity? She's using you, Adrian. Can't you see that? She's a fortune hunter who saw an opportunity. That's enough. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. You've lied about me, attacked my father's memory, threatened Adrian's work. And for what? Because you wanted to marry a title? Because you couldn't stand the thought of someone choosing love over political convenience? Love? Victoria spat the word. You don't love him. You love what he can give you. Security, status, a way out of the poverty you fell into. You're right about one thing. I did fall into poverty, and I clawed my way back through governess positions and ladies' maid work and every degrading job I could find just to survive. So yes, I understand what it means to have nothing, to be desperate, to be afraid. Elena moved closer to Victoria, her voice dropping to something dangerous. But I also understand what it means to have integrity, to refuse to compromise my values even when it would be easier. You could have had any man in London if you'd just been honest, but you chose manipulation instead, and now you have nothing. Victoria's hand flew up to slap her. Elena caught her wrist mid-swing. Don't, Elena said quietly. Don't give me a reason to have you charged with assault. Walk away, Victoria, while you still can. For a moment, Victoria looked like she might actually fight. Then something in her face crumpled. The mask of superiority fell away, revealing someone young and scared and furious at a world that hadn't given her what she wanted. I hope you're happy together, she said, her voice breaking. I hope it's worth everything you're about to lose. She wrenched her wrist free and fled. Adrian stared at Elena with something like awe. That was necessary. She would have kept coming after us otherwise. Elena rubbed her wrist where Victoria's nails had dug in. Besides, I'm tired of being the victim in everyone else's story. If Victoria wants war, she can have it, but she's going to lose. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Too late. You've already been there. Remember when you tried to send me away? Adrian winced. Don't remind me. That was the stupidest decision I've ever made. Good. Remember that feeling. You're going to need it for what comes next. What comes next? Elena smiled, and it was fierce and bright and full of determination. We fight. For your reforms. For us. For everything your aunt believed we could be. And we don't stop until we win. The funeral took place 3 days later, under a sky that couldn't decide between sunshine and rain. True to Lady Catherine's wishes, it was a celebration rather than a dirge. The flowers were colorful, roses and lilies and bright orange marigolds that the old woman had loved. The music was uplifting, and the reception afterward featured champagne instead of somber tea. Half of London's aristocracy attended, though whether to pay respects or to gawk at the scandal was unclear. Adrian didn't care. He stood at the graveside with Elena beside him, her hand clasped in his, and said goodbye to the woman who had raised him. She'd be laughing at all this, he murmured as another group of society matrons whispered behind their fans. All these people pretending to mourn while really just fishing for gossip. She'd also be proud, Elena said. You kept your promise. You fought for us. The fight's not over. Victoria's been quiet, but that just means she's planning something bigger. Let her plan. We'll be ready. After the burial, they returned to Blackthorne House for the reception. The servants had outdone themselves. The ballroom was filled with guests, the tables laden with food and drink, and musicians played soft melodies in the corner. Adrian moved through it all mechanically, accepting condolences and making small talk, but his mind was elsewhere, on the woman who had changed everything, on the promise he'd made to his dying aunt, on the future that suddenly seemed possible instead of terrifying. He found Elena in the library an hour into the reception, hiding from the crowds. I thought you'd be here, he said. She turned from the window, and in the afternoon light she looked ethereal, beautiful, completely out of his league and somehow, miraculously, his. I needed a moment. Is it terrible that I'm exhausted by people offering sympathy while clearly judging me? It's honest, which is more than most of them manage. Adrian crossed to stand beside her. I have something for you. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Elena's breath caught. Adrian? Let me do this properly, the way I should have from the beginning. He opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. This was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to someone who made me brave. Someone who saw past the title to the man underneath. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. I know we've only known each other for weeks. I know society will say we're moving too fast, that scandal surrounds us, that we should wait for things to settle. He took the ring from the box. But I'm done waiting, done playing it safe, done pretending that I can do this life without you. He dropped to one knee. Elena Whitmore, will you marry me? Will you help me be brave? Will you spend the rest of your life refusing to let me hide behind walls? She was crying openly now. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he stood and kissed her, right there in the library, with the reception continuing in the next room and half of London probably watching through the windows. When they finally broke apart, Elena laughed through her tears. Your guests are going to talk. Let them. I'm done caring what they think. A polite cough from the doorway interrupted them. Mrs. Pemberton stood there, her expression carefully neutral. Your Grace, Lord Pemberton wishes to speak with you. He says it's urgent. Adrian sighed. Of course it is. They found Lord Pemberton in Adrian's study, pacing nervously. Blackthorne, Miss Whitmore. He nodded to them both. Forgive the intrusion during your aunt's reception, but this couldn't wait. He pulled a newspaper from his coat. The evening edition. It just hit the streets. Adrian took it, and his face went pale. The headline read, Ashcroft confesses, Lord admits embezzlement and false accusations below it. A detailed article in Lord Ashcroft's own words, explaining everything. The theft from the housing fund. Victoria's campaign of lies against Elena. The political manipulation. All of it laid bare for the public to read. He actually did it, Elena whispered. He did more than that, Pemberton said. He's resigned from the committee and announced he's stepping down from all public positions. His daughter, Lady Victoria, has left London entirely. Word is she's gone to the continent, to avoid the scandal. Adrian set down the paper carefully. This will destroy their family. It already has, but Ashcroft seems to think it's deserved. Pemberton hesitated. There's more. The retraction about your father, Miss Whitmore. It's in there, too. Ashcroft admits that every accusation was fabricated, that he manufactured evidence and paid witnesses to lie. Your family name is cleared. Elena's knees went weak. Adrian's arm came around her waist, holding her steady. Why? She asked. Why would he go this far? Guilt, perhaps. Or maybe your speech at the committee actually reached him. Pemberton smiled slightly. Either way, the ton is reeling. Half of them are horrified. The other half are fascinated. You two have become the most talked-about couple in London. Wonderful, Adrian said dryly. Actually, it is. Because the housing reform bill is now moving through Parliament faster than anyone expected. Turns out publicly shaming corrupt lords is excellent motivation for others to prove they're not corrupt. Pemberton clapped Adrian on the shoulder. You did it, Blackthorne. You actually did it. The reforms are going to pass. After Pemberton left, Adrian and Elena stood in the study, the newspaper still sitting on the desk like evidence of a world that had shifted on its axis. I can't believe it's over, Elena said. It's not over. The reforms still need to pass Parliament. The Ashcroft scandal will have aftershocks, and we still have to actually get married without society imploding. Minor details. She smiled up at him. We survived Victoria. We survived the committee. We'll survive the rest too. A knock on the door interrupted them yet again. A footman entered, carrying a letter on a silver tray. Your Grace, this just arrived. The messenger said it was urgent. Adrian opened it, scanned the contents, and his expression changed. What is it? Elena asked. It's from my solicitor. Apparently my aunt left something in her will, something she wanted you to have. She already gave me the pearls. Not jewelry, property. She left you the townhouse in Mayfair, the one she inherited from her first husband. Adrian looked stunned. It's yours. Outright. No conditions? No strings? She transferred the deed into your name before she died. Elena couldn't process the words. That's impossible. That house is worth £50,000 at least. Adrian set down the letter. She wanted you to be independent, to never have to rely on anyone's charity again, to have choices. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks for the second time that day. She barely knew me. Why would she? Because she saw you, really saw you, and she wanted to make sure you'd be safe no matter what happened. Adrian pulled her close. My aunt always took care of the people she loved. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet study while the reception continued in the ballroom. Finally, Elena pulled back. We should rejoin your guests. They'll talk if we're gone too long. They're already talking. Let them. But he followed her back to the ballroom anyway. The reception had shifted in tone during their absence. People still clustered in groups, still whispered behind fans and gloved hands. But now the whispers carried a different energy. Curiosity instead of condemnation. Interest instead of judgment. Word of the engagement had spread, apparently. So had news of Lord Ashcroft's confession. Several guests approached to offer congratulations, some sincere, some clearly fishing for details to spread at their next social gathering. Adrian handled them all with practiced grace, his hand never leaving Elena's waist. Then Lady Hartwick, one of society's most influential matrons, approached. She was elderly, sharp-eyed, and known for making or breaking reputations with a single cutting remark. Your Grace, Miss Whitmore. She looked between them with shrewd assessment. Quite the excitement today. A funeral, an engagement, and a scandal that will be talked about for years. Lady Hartwick. Adrian inclined his head. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it. Your aunt was a dear friend, sharp as a whip until the very end. She turned to Elena. I knew your mother, child, before she married your father. We came out the same season. Elena's breath caught. You did? Indeed, she was the kindest person I ever met. Too kind, perhaps. She deserved better than what life gave her. Lady Hartwick's expression softened. But she'd be proud of you, surviving what you've survived. Standing up to that viper Victoria Ashcroft, making this stubborn duke finally admit he's human. I'm standing right here, Adrian said mildly. I'm aware. I'm old, not blind. Lady Hartwick smiled. You're good for him, Miss Whitmore. Don't let society tell you otherwise, and don't let anyone make you feel like you need to apologize for falling in love. She moved on before Elena could respond, but her words lingered. Others followed. Not everyone was kind. There were still whispers, still judgmental looks, still people who clearly thought Elena was a fortune hunter who'd manipulated her way into a duke's life. But there were also allies, people who remembered her family before the fall, people who admired her courage, people who were simply tired of Victoria Ashcroft's brand of cruelty and were glad to see her defeated. By the time the last guest departed, Elena was exhausted but hopeful. They stood in the empty ballroom, surrounded by the debris of the reception, empty champagne glasses, scattered flowers, chairs pushed askew. We survived, Elena said. We did more than survive. We won. Adrian pulled her into his arms. The reforms are moving forward. Ashcroft confessed. Victoria's gone, and I'm marrying the woman I love. When? Elena looked up at him. When are we getting married? As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if the church would allow it. She laughed. We need to post bans, find a venue, send invitations, or we could elope, go to Scotland, marry over the anvil, and skip all the society nonsense. You're a duke. You can't elope. Watch me. Adrian. She cupped his face. Your aunt wanted a celebration. Music, champagne, colors. We should give her that. Give us that. A wedding that shows the world we're not hiding. He kissed her forehead. You're right, as usual. Fine. We'll do it properly. But I'm choosing the date, and it's going to be soon. How soon? 3 weeks. That's enough time for bands and planning, but not enough time for me to lose my nerve. You're not going to lose your nerve. You don't know that. I spent 5 years being the Ice Duke. 3 weeks might be long enough for old habits to reassert themselves. Elena smiled. Then I'll just have to keep you warm. They stood in the empty ballroom as servants began quietly cleaning up around them, two people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. Outside, London continued its endless rhythm. The scandal sheets would print more stories. Society would continue to gossip. The Ashcroft family would rebuild or collapse entirely. But inside Blackthorne House, something had shifted. The Ice Duke had finally thawed, and the woman who'd refused to disappear had claimed her place beside him. 3 weeks suddenly felt like both an eternity and not nearly enough time. The next morning brought another surprise. Adrian was in his study, reviewing documents for the Housing Bill's parliamentary presentation, when Mrs. Pemberton knocked. Your Grace, there's a woman here to see Miss Whitmore. She says she's family. Elena appeared in the doorway, her face puzzled. Family? I don't have any family left. She says her name is Beatrice Aldridge. She claims to be your aunt. Elena's face went white. My mother's sister. The one who gave Victoria the information. Adrian finished grimly. He stood. Do you want to see her? I don't know. Elena took a breath. Yes. I need to hear what she has to say. They found Beatrice Aldridge in the morning room, perched on the edge of a chair like a bird ready to flee. She was in her 50s, thin and faded, wearing a dress that had been expensive once but was now worn at the seams. When she saw Elena, she stood abruptly. Elena, oh, my dear child, I'm so sorry. Sorry? Elena's voice was ice. You sold my father's secrets to Victoria Ashcroft. You helped her destroy what was left of our family name. And now you're sorry? I needed the money. After your father died, after everything fell apart, I had nothing. My husband's investments failed. We lost the house. I was desperate. So was I. But I didn't betray anyone. Beatrice flinched. You're right. There's no excuse. I was cruel and selfish, and I've regretted it every day since. She pulled a folded newspaper from her bag, the evening edition with Ashcroft's confession. But I saw this, saw what that terrible woman did to you, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. What do you mean? Adrian asked. The things Victoria claimed about your father, Elena. About the mistress and the illegitimate children. They were lies, all of it. Beatrice's voice shook. Your father wasn't perfect. He gambled too much. He made mistakes. But he never betrayed your mother, never kept a mistress, never fathered other children. I told Victoria that, but she didn't care. She fabricated the whole story and paid me to stay quiet." Elena's hands clenched into fists. "And you took the money." "I did. Because I was weak and scared and stupid. But I'm here now to tell you the truth. Your father loved your mother desperately. And when she died, something in him broke. That's why he gambled away everything. He couldn't face a world without her." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "Why didn't you help us? When we lost everything, why did you turn us away?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I'd married for money instead of love, and ended up with neither. Because seeing you and your mother reminded me of all the choices I'd made wrong." Beatrice stepped closer. "But I'm here now, to apologize, to tell you the truth, and to give you this." She handed Elena a small wooden box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, yellowed with age. "These are from your father to your mother. He wrote her every single day when they were courting. Love letters, poems, promises." Beatrice's voice broke. "I found them after your mother died. I should have given them to you then, but I was too bitter, too angry at the world. I kept them like a spiteful child. But you should have them. You should know how much they loved each other." Elena clutched the box to her chest, unable to speak. Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for bringing these, Mrs. Aldridge, but I think it's time for you to leave." Beatrice nodded. "I understand. I wanted you to know, Elena. Your parents' love was real. You came from that, from something beautiful and true. Don't let Victoria's lies take that from you." She left quietly, and Elena collapsed into a chair, the box of letters in her lap. Adrian knelt beside her. "Are you all right?" "I don't know. I thought my father was this terrible person, that everything Victoria said might be true. And now—" She opened one of the letters with shaking hands. The handwriting was elegant, the words tender and full of devotion. Her father's voice, preserved in ink, telling her mother how much he adored her, how she made every day worth living, how their future daughter would be the luckiest child in the world to have her as a mother. "They really loved each other," Elena whispered. "They did. And they made you. So something beautiful came from all that pain." Elena looked up at him, her face wet with tears. "I want that. What they had. The kind of love that survives everything, even death. Then let's build it, together. No more walls, no more hiding, just us, being brave enough to love each other completely." She kissed him then, salt-sweet and fierce, pouring every ounce of hope and fear and love into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, she smiled through her tears. 3 weeks, you said? 3 weeks. Then you're mine, legally, publicly, irrevocably. Promise? I promise. No matter what happens. No matter what scandals or obstacles or challenges come our way. He took her hand, the sapphire ring glinting in the morning light. "I'm done running. Done being the Ice Duke. I'm ready to be just Adrian. Your Adrian. And I'm ready to be just Elena. Your Elena." Outside, the city woke to another day of scandal and gossip. But inside Blackthorne House, 2 broken people had found something worth fighting for. And for the first time in 5 years, the future looked bright. The 3 weeks that followed moved like a dream and a battle all at once. The housing reform bill advanced through Parliament with unexpected speed, propelled by the scandal that had exposed corruption at the highest levels. Lords who might have dragged their feet suddenly rushed to prove their integrity. The bill passed the House of Lords in record time and moved to the Commons, where support was even stronger. Adrian spent long days in parliamentary sessions, fighting for every clause, every provision, every detail that would actually help the families living in London's worst slums. He came home exhausted each night, but there was life in his eyes now, purpose that went beyond duty. Elena spent those weeks planning a wedding that would honor Lady Catherine's wishes, while also making a statement that neither she nor Adrian could be intimidated into hiding. It would be at St. George's, Hanover Square, the most fashionable church in London. The ceremony would be public, the guest list enormous, and the celebration afterward would be held at Blackthorne House with enough color and music and champagne to scandalize the more conservative members of society. Mrs. Pemberton, who had warmed considerably toward Elena after Lord Ashcroft's confession, threw herself into the preparations with surprising enthusiasm. Lady Catherine would want this done properly, the housekeeper said, reviewing seating charts with Elena one afternoon. Every detail perfect, every guest impressed. We'll show them all that the Duke of Ravencrest knows how to celebrate. Elena smiled. You called him the Duke of Ravencrest, not his Grace, with that disapproving tone. Mrs. Pemberton's lips twitched. Perhaps I've been convinced that some rules deserve to be broken. Not many, mind you, but some. The scandal sheets continued their coverage, but the tone had shifted. What had started as vicious attacks on Elena's character had transformed into fascinated speculation about the romance that had brought down the Ice Duke. Some papers were still critical, old society matrons who thought the whole affair unseemly, but others had embraced the story with almost fairy tale enthusiasm. Victoria Ashcroft remained in exile somewhere on the continent. Her father had retreated to his country estate, facing criminal charges that would likely result in prison time. Their influence in London society had evaporated overnight, but Elena knew better than to assume the battle was completely won. 10 days before the wedding, a new scandal broke. Elena was in the morning room reviewing flower arrangements when Adrian burst in with a newspaper clutched in his fist. "What's wrong?" she asked, standing immediately. He handed her the paper without speaking. The headline read, "The Whitmore Deception. New evidence suggests fortune hunter planned seduction from the start." Elena's blood ran cold as she read. The article claimed to have letters, supposedly written by Elena to a friend, discussing her plan to secure employment at Blackthorne House specifically to seduce Adrian. It included quotes that sounded almost plausible, discussing his wealth, his vulnerability after his wife's death, and the opportunity he represented. "This is Victoria," Elena said. "It has to be. She's not done fighting. The letters are forgeries. They have to be." Adrian's voice was tight with controlled fury. "But they're convincing, detailed, and people will believe them because it confirms what they already suspected." "Do you believe them?" "Of course not, but—" He ran a hand through his hair. "The wedding is in 10 days. If this story gains traction, if people start questioning whether you manipulated your way into my life, it could undermine everything we've built, the reforms, our reputation, our future." Elena set down the paper with careful precision. "Then we prove it's a lie. Just like we proved everything else Victoria threw at us was a lie." "How?" "We can't prove you didn't write letters that never existed." "No, but we can prove I didn't need to manipulate you, that what we have is real." She moved closer to him. "Adrian, do you remember what you said at the committee meeting? That you were done choosing fear over love?" "Yes." "Then we do the same thing now. We don't hide, we don't defend, we show them the truth so clearly that the lies can't compete." "What are you proposing?" Elena took a breath, an idea forming that was either brilliant or completely insane. "We get married, now, today, before the official ceremony, a private wedding with just a few witnesses. And then we hold a reception at the tenement housing site in the East End." Adrian stared at her. "You want to get married in a slum?" "I want to get married and then immediately go to the place that represents everything you've been fighting for. Show society that this isn't about wealth or status or manipulation. It's about actually caring, about the people the reforms will help, about proving that love and duty aren't opposites. They're the same thing. Society will think we've lost our minds." "Good. Let them think that. Let them see us standing with the families who will benefit from your reforms. Let them see that we're not afraid of their judgment." Her eyes blazed with determination. "Victoria wants to paint me as a fortune hunter? Fine. I'll prove I married you for something more valuable than money, for the chance to help change people's lives." Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he started to smile. "My aunt was right about you. You're absolutely fearless." "I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of letting Victoria win." He pulled her into his arms. "Then let's do it. Let's get married today and show London exactly what kind of duchess you're going to be." They were married 4 hours later in the private chapel at Blackthorne House. Lord Pemberton stood as witness, along with Mrs. Pemberton, who cried openly throughout the entire ceremony. The vicar was hastily summoned and sworn to secrecy until the official wedding in 10 days. Elena wore the blue dress she'd worn to the Halstead ball, the same dress she'd been wearing when Adrian first admitted he noticed her. Adrian wore black, as always, but he'd added a waistcoat in deep blue to match her gown. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian kissed her like she was his salvation and his damnation, all wrapped in one impossible package. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too. Now let's go shock society." They arrived at the East End tenement district an hour later in Adrian's personal carriage, which caused immediate confusion among the residents. Dukes didn't visit this part of London, certainly not with their new wives. But Adrian climbed out of that carriage and extended his hand to Elena like they were arriving at a ball. The street was narrow and filthy, lined with crumbling buildings that housed dozens of families and spaces meant for one. Children played in gutters. Women hung washing from windows. Men returning from factory work stopped to stare at the aristocrats who had invaded their world. Adrian had arranged for tables to be set up in the street, laden with food and drink, simple fare, but more than most of these families saw in a month. He'd also brought musicians who began playing cheerful tunes that echoed off the brick walls. Then he did something that made Elena's heart swell with love. He began introducing her to the residents, not as the Duke of Ravencrest deigning to visit the poor, but as neighbors, as people who lived in the same city and deserved the same respect. "This is Mrs. Fletcher," he said, bringing Elena to meet a woman with 3 children clinging to her skirts. She works 14 hours a day in the textile factory and still manages to keep her family fed. "Mrs. Fletcher, this is my wife, Elena. We were married this afternoon." Mrs. Fletcher curtsied awkwardly, clearly confused. "Your Grace, your wife is very beautiful." "She is, and she insisted we come here today because she wanted to meet the people who matter, the people these reforms are actually for." Elena knelt down to the children's level. "What are your names?" The oldest girl, maybe 7, whispered, "Sarah, ma'am, and this is Thomas and baby Anne." "Those are lovely names. Would you like some cake? I heard there's cake on those tables." The children's eyes went wide. They looked to their mother, who nodded permission, and then raced toward the food with shrieks of delight. Mrs. Fletcher's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Your Grace, both of you, for noticing us, for caring." They spent the next 3 hours in that street, meeting families, hearing stories, witnessing firsthand the conditions that the housing reforms would address. Adrian took notes, asked questions, and promised that the changes would come soon. And Elena stood beside him, holding babies, playing with children, listening to women who worked themselves to exhaustion just to survive. A crowd began to gather. Then journalists, drawn by reports of the Duke of Ravencrest celebrating his secret marriage in the slums. One of them shouted a question. "Your Grace, is it true you married Miss Whitmore to silence the accusations that she's a fortune hunter?" Adrian turned to face the crowd of reporters and curious onlookers. "I married Elena Whitmore because I love her, because she showed me that being a duke means more than title and tradition. It means actually helping people. Because she refused to disappear when society tried to make her invisible." He pulled Elena closer. "And yes, I married her today, in private, because we wanted our first act as husband and wife to be this, being here, with the families who need these reforms." "But the letters," another journalist called, "the ones claiming she planned to seduce you for your fortune, are forgeries. Fabrications from someone who couldn't accept that genuine love exists." Elena stepped forward, her voice carrying across the crowd. "I didn't come to Blackthorne House to seduce anyone. I came because I needed work. I stayed because Lady Catherine needed a companion. And I fell in love because Adrian Blackthorne is a good man who hides behind ice because he's afraid of being hurt." She turned to face Adrian fully. "I don't want his fortune. I have my own now, thanks to Lady Catherine's generosity. I don't need his title. I've been a Viscount's daughter and a nobody. And I survived both. What I need is him. The man who fights for tenant reforms even when it costs him politically. The man who spent 5 years grieving but is finally learning to live again. That's who I married. And if society can't accept that, then society can..." She stopped herself, but the crowd was already laughing and applauding. Adrian kissed her right there in the middle of the East End street, in front of journalists and residents and curious onlookers. When they finally broke apart, he addressed the crowd one more time. The official wedding ceremony will take place as planned in 10 days at St. George's. Everyone here is invited, all of you. I'll arrange transportation. I want society to see who really matters, who these reforms are for, who Elena and I are actually fighting for. The cheers were deafening. The next morning, every newspaper in London ran the story. Some were critical, calling the stunt manipulative, questioning whether inviting slum residents to a society wedding was appropriate. But most were fascinated. The image of the Duke and new Duchess of Ravencrest celebrating their marriage in the East End, surrounded by the very people they were trying to help, captured the public imagination in a way that scandal never could. The forged letters were mentioned, but they'd lost their power. It was hard to paint someone as a fortune hunter when she spent her wedding day playing with children in the streets. Victoria's final attempt at destruction had failed. The week before the official ceremony passed in a blur of final preparations and unexpected developments. The housing reform bill passed the House of Commons with overwhelming support. The official implementation would begin within months, bringing clean water, better sanitation, and safer housing to thousands of families. Lord Ashcroft was formally charged with embezzlement and would face trial. His confession had ensured there would be no lengthy legal battle, just sentencing. And society, slowly but surely, began to shift its opinion of Elena. Lady Hartwick led the charge, hosting a tea where she publicly declared that Elena Blackthorne was exactly the kind of Duchess London needed, someone who understood both privilege and poverty, who could navigate ballrooms and slums with equal grace. Other society matrons followed. Not all of them, but enough that the tide began to turn. On the morning of the official wedding, Elena stood in her room at Blackthorne House, wearing the gown that had taken 3 seamstresses 2 weeks to complete. It was ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, elegant but not ostentatious. She wore Lady Catherine's pearls and the sapphire ring that had belonged to Adrian's mother. Mrs. Pemberton dabbed at her eyes as she adjusted Elena's veil. "You look beautiful, Your Grace. Lady Catherine would be so proud. I wish she could be here." "She is, in spirit, and in everything you and His Grace are doing to honor her memory." A knock on the door interrupted them. Lord Pemberton entered, looking distinguished in his formal attire. "The carriages are ready, and I have something for you." He handed Elena a sealed letter. "This arrived this morning, from the continent." Elena's hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and achingly familiar despite having seen it only in newspaper forgeries. "Miss Whitmore, or rather, Duchess Blackthorne, I write this from exile, knowing full well you have no reason to read it, let alone believe anything I say. But I find I cannot proceed with my life without acknowledging several truths. You won, not through manipulation or scheming or any of the tactics I accused you of employing. You won because you were genuine in a world of artifice. Because you loved Adrian Blackthorne when I only wanted to own him. Because you were brave enough to fight when I relied on cowardice and cruelty. I destroyed my own future through jealousy and spite. My father faces prison because I pushed him to acts he might have avoided. And you, the woman I tried to crush, emerged as exactly what Adrian needed, what London needed. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that the final set of forged letters, the ones claiming you planned to seduce Adrian, were my last desperate attempt to salvage pride from complete defeat. They were lies. All of it. And I regret that I could not simply accept loss with grace. May your marriage bring you the happiness I was too bitter to allow myself to find. Victoria Ashcroft. Elena read it twice, then handed it to Mrs. Pemberton. "What will you do with it?" the housekeeper asked. "Nothing. It doesn't matter anymore. Victoria's already defeated. This is just her acknowledgement of it." Elena took a breath. "Let's go get married. Officially this time." St. George's Church in Hanover Square was packed to capacity. The pews held an impossible mix of people, lords and ladies in their finest beside families from the East End wearing their only good clothes. Children fidgeted, society matrons whispered behind fans, factory workers sat in awed silence, overwhelmed by the opulence. Adrian stood at the altar, Lord Pemberton beside him, looking calm but for the slight tremor in his hands. When the organ began to play and Elena appeared at the back of the church, his expression transformed. She walked down that aisle alone, no father to give her away, no family to represent her past, just herself, moving toward her future with steady steps and her head held high. When she reached Adrian, he took her hands and whispered, "You're beautiful." "You said that already, this morning, when we were technically already married." "I'll say it every day for the rest of our lives." The ceremony was traditional, the vows familiar. But when the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, again, Adrian kissed her like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between. The church erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle together, passing rows of people who represented every stratum of London society. And Elena felt something shift inside her. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't the fallen aristocrat or the fortune hunter or the scandal. She was the Duchess of Ravencrest, and she was going to use that position to change things. The reception at Blackthorne House was exactly what Lady Catherine would have wanted. The ballroom blazed with color, flowers in every shade imaginable, ribbons streaming from the chandeliers and tables laden with food and champagne. The orchestra played everything from waltzes to folk songs. And the guests, society elites dancing beside factory workers, children racing through rooms that had never heard laughter, lords discussing housing conditions with the very people who lived in those conditions, created a scene that would be talked about for generations. Adrian found Elena on the terrace an hour into the celebration, escaping the crowds for a moment of quiet. "Having second thoughts?" she teased. "About marrying you? Never. About inviting half of London to our house? Possibly." She laughed. "Your aunt would have loved this chaos. She would have orchestrated even more of it." He pulled her close. "I keep thinking about what she said, that last night, about how the pain of loving and losing is nothing compared to the emptiness of never loving at all. She was right. She usually was, infuriatingly so." Adrian looked out over the gardens where more guests had spilled onto the lawn. 5 years ago, I stood in this exact spot after Isabel's funeral and swore I'd never let anyone close again, that I'd protect myself by staying distant, cold, untouchable. The Ice Duke. Yes, and I genuinely believed that was the only way to survive, that letting you in would destroy me. He turned to face her fully. "Instead, you saved me. From myself. From a half-life that looked safe but was really just slow death." Elena touched his face. "You saved me too. From disappearing. From believing that survival was all I deserved. So what do we deserve now?" "This. Exactly this. A messy, complicated, beautiful life where we fight for what matters and love each other through all of it." He kissed her softly, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. Then a child's laugh echoed from the ballroom, followed by Mrs. Pemberton's voice scolding someone for trying to climb the curtains. They smiled against each other's lips. "We should go back," Elena said. "In a minute. Let me have one more moment of my wife all to myself before society reclaims us." "You called me your wife, not Miss Whitmore, not Elena. Your wife." "You are my wife, my Duchess, my everything." Adrian's expression grew serious. "I know the road ahead won't be easy. The reforms will face opposition. Society will always have those who disapprove of us. We'll face challenges we can't even imagine yet. I know. And I want you to know that no matter what comes, I'm done making decisions out of fear, done choosing duty over love. From now on, we choose together. We fight together. We face everything together. Promise?" "I promise. No more walls, no more ice, just us, being human, being messy, being real." Elena kissed him again, pouring 5 years of his grief and 2 years of her survival, and all their hope for the future into that single moment. When they finally returned to the ballroom, hand in hand, the crowd parted for them. Adrian led Elena to the center of the floor, and the orchestra began a waltz. They danced the way they'd done everything else, not perfectly, but genuinely, aware of every eye watching but no longer caring what those eyes saw, because they'd survived the worst society could throw at them. They'd fought scandal and manipulation and their own demons. They'd chosen each other when it would have been easier to choose safety, and they'd won. As the waltz ended and another began, Other couples joined them on the floor, lords dancing with their ladies, factory workers attempting the steps with determined concentration, children weaving between the adults, shrieking with laughter. It was chaos and beauty and everything proper society said a ducal reception shouldn't be. It was perfect. Later that night, after the last guests had departed and the servants had begun the monumental task of cleaning, Adrian and Elena stood in the now quiet ballroom. "I keep thinking about that first day," Elena said, "when you told me not to touch you in public, when you made me feel invisible. I was an idiot. You were scared, but so was I. We were both just trying to survive. And now?" She turned to face him, this man who had been ice and was now fire, this duke who had built walls and then torn them down, this human who had finally learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness. Now we live, really live, not just survive, but thrive. We help those families in the East End. We scandalize society matrons. We love each other so loudly that no one can doubt it. She smiled. We refuse to disappear. Adrian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she might vanish. "I spent 5 years being untouchable," he said quietly, convincing myself that distance was strength, that isolation was protection, that the Ice Duke was safer than the man underneath. And now? Now I know the truth. That being touched, really touched, not just physically, but emotionally, is the only thing that makes us real. That letting someone see all of you, the broken parts, and the scared parts, and the parts that don't make sense, is the bravest thing a person can do. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "So touch me, Elena, in public and private, in ballrooms and bedrooms, in front of society and in the quiet moments when it's just us. Touch me and remind me that I'm alive, that we're alive, that we survived everything that tried to destroy us and came out stronger." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I love you. So much it terrifies me." "Good, be terrified with me. We'll face it together." They stood in the empty ballroom as dawn began to paint the London sky in shades of rose and gold. Two people who had been broken and alone had found each other against all odds. The Ice Duke and the Invisible Woman, the man who couldn't be touched, and the woman who refused to disappear. They'd fought scandal and society and their own fears, and they'd won. Not because they were perfect, not because they had all the answers, but because they chose each other, every single day, in every single moment, because love, real love, wasn't about being untouchable. It was about being brave enough to be seen. 3 months later, the first phase of the housing reforms was completed. Clean water now flowed to tenements that had never had plumbing. Buildings were repaired. Families were relocated to safer structures. Children stopped dying of diseases that had once been inevitable. Adrian and Elena visited the East End regularly, checking progress, listening to concerns, and ensuring that the reforms actually helped instead of just existing on paper. They became a familiar sight in those streets, the Duke and Duchess of Ravencrest walking hand in hand through neighborhoods that most aristocrats pretended didn't exist. Society never quite knew what to make of them. Some admired their dedication, others found it unseemly. But everyone agreed on one thing: the Ice Duke was gone forever. In his place was a man who laughed openly, who held his wife's hand in public without hesitation, who fought for what he believed in and refused to apologize for loving completely. And beside him was a woman who had survived poverty and scandal and the cruelest games society could play, emerging not bitter, but fierce, determined not just to rebuild her own life, but to help others rebuild theirs. One afternoon, as they walked through a newly renovated tenement building, Mrs. Fletcher approached them with her 3 children. "Your Graces, I wanted to thank you for this." She gestured to the clean hallways, the proper windows, the rooms that were finally large enough for her family. "For seeing us, for caring." Elena knelt down to Sarah's level. "How do you like your new home?" The little girl beamed. "We have 2 rooms now, and the water doesn't make us sick anymore." "I'm so glad." Elena hugged her. "You deserve a safe place to grow up." As they left the building, Adrian pulled Elena close. "Do you ever regret it? The scandal, the fight, everything we went through?" "Never. Do you?" "Not for a second. though I do occasionally miss the days when people were too afraid of me to ask invasive questions." She laughed. "You were never that intimidating." "I was terrifying. Ask anyone." "I'm asking you. Were you ever really as cold as everyone thought?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. "No, I was just scared. Scared of losing someone again. Scared of feeling too much. Scared of being vulnerable." He touched her face. "You taught me that being scared is fine. Letting fear make your decisions isn't. Your aunt taught you that. I just reminded you. You did more than remind me. You showed me what courage actually looks like. Standing in my study refusing to leave. Dancing at that ball when society wanted you invisible. Fighting for us when it would have been easier to walk away." His eyes shone with emotion. "You're the bravest person I've ever known." "Then we're perfectly matched, because you're the bravest person I've ever known. You just hid it behind ice for a while." They walked back to their carriage through streets that were slowly transforming from slums into neighborhoods. The work wasn't finished. It would take years to address decades of neglect. But it had begun, and it wouldn't stop. As they drove back to Mayfair, Elena rested her head on Adrian's shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About rules, about the first one you gave me. Do not touch me in public." "I was an idiot." "You were protecting yourself. But I've been thinking about what the real rule should have been." She looked up at him. "Not, don't touch me, but don't let me hide. Don't let me build walls so high that I forget what it's like to be human. Don't let me disappear into duty and distance." "Is that the rule now?" "That's the rule. For both of us. We don't let each other hide. We stay visible, vulnerable, real. Even when it's terrifying?" "Especially when it's terrifying." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "I can do that, as long as you promise to do the same." "I promise. No more disappearing. No more being invisible. From now on, we take up space. We matter. We exist loudly and completely and without apology." The carriage pulled up to Blackthorne House, where servants waited to welcome them home, where rooms that had once been cold and empty now felt warm and alive, where the Ice Duke had finally learned to thaw, and where a woman who had been invisible had claimed her place in the light. They climbed out of the carriage, Adrian's hand never leaving Elena's, and walked into their home together. Not hiding, not afraid, not untouchable, just human, just real, just in love. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Years later, when people told the story of the Duke and Duchess of Ravencrest, they would talk about the scandal that brought them together, about the political battles fought and won, about the reforms that changed thousands of lives. But those who knew them personally told a different story. They told of a man who learned that walls don't protect. They imprison. And a woman who refused to disappear, even when the entire world tried to make her invisible. They told of two broken people who found each other and chose to be brave, who touched when society said to keep distance, who loved when fear said to hide, who built a life together that mattered, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And they told of the greatest lesson the Ice Duke ever learned, that sometimes the bravest act a person can make is refusing to let fear win, is choosing love over safety, is allowing yourself to be touched, really touched, by another human being, not in spite of the risk, but because of it. Because being untouchable isn't strength, it's just another form of disappearing. And Adrian Blackthorne and Elena Whitmore had spent too long being invisible. Now they lived in the light, together, unafraid, completely, beautifully, perfectly touchable. And they never let go.